with our listeners about who you are and why you've accepted the invitation to join us today in our conversation.
Absolutely. First of all, thank you so much for having me here today. As you mentioned, Karen, I am a retired teacher. I retired back in 2017, and I actually started my journey at a private school in Mulholland called the Westland School, where I always say that's where I really learned all about English language arts. I moved on to Inglewood Unified School District, taught there for several years, moved out to Palmdale, was a teacher in the Palmdale School District for almost 10 years, and then spent the last 15 in the Saugus Union School District. So I've been in a lot of diverse types of communities and seen so much. And when you said ELA, like, do you want to come on and talk about ELA? I am all things ELA. In the last few years, I worked at an elementary school teaching 5th and 6th grade, and our team actually departmentalized. So I was the ELA teacher, and all the students came through and rotated, which was phenomenal. But it really allowed me to immerse myself in English language arts. Departmentalization in elementary schools is everything. That's a different topic. But so I'm excited to get to be here today and just to share a little bit about my experience and such.
Well, thanks, Dawna, for being here. We are so excited to have you. We know that your background, your knowledge, and your expertise will lend so great with the topic that we have for today. During our last show, we discussed the country's most recent literacy rates with that's happening today, and we'd like to share a few additional data points with you and our listeners. So we pulled some data from the Center for Education Statistics, and found that California has one of the lowest literacy rates in the country, alongside approximately 41 other states in North America. And Karen and I, we discuss all the time what's going on and what can we do. She has children and I've got grandchildren that are in the system, going into the system. And so we have our concerns and our thoughts and all of that. And so I think that it's important to remember that public schools, both traditional and charter, educate about 85 to 90% of elementary and secondary students. So that's a large population of students that we are working with when we think about the literacy rates being one of the poorest, right? Mm-hmm. And then, as a consequence, our nation's economic stability, security, and social outcomes really depends on how well our public schools basically do their job.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. So I find it difficult to say that we have done our job well. When I see these statistics and I see these things, and I also think about those students who have historically been at the lower end of the academic excellence trajectory, so to speak, right? Those kids who have been underserved. And it's not easy to meet all of the needs. We know within a country, or especially in California, where our schools are so diverse, right? Lots of diversity. But I know that it can be done because I've seen those schools that do it well. Mm-hmm. And so Karen and I know that you also, Karen and I have also been looking at some things, and Karen heard something very interesting that I'd like her to share, that she heard on Good Day LA, that kind of speaks to what we're talking about in terms of literacy. So Karen, can you share that?
Yes. So, every morning as I'm reading the paper and watching the news, I was watching a Good Day LA the other morning, and they had this gentleman on. He was about 35 years old. He was in Costa Mesa. Mm-hmm. And he said that he taught himself how to read, that he could not read. And so he, talked about how he was labeled as a bad kid in school and just kind of passed on. And, when he would go to complete an application, whether it be to interview or something, he would always make up an excuse, that he would need help. Oh, I forgot my glasses. Oh, I can't really see that well. Can you help me? And so when he became a dad, he decided, I'm going to teach myself how to read. I don't want my son to grow up the way I did. He said there were no books in his home, no books, no magazines, nothing. So he taught himself how to read at 35, well, probably over, a few years before then. He was reading a book. I forget the name of it. It was a novel. And he would go on TikTok as he's reading the novel to help. And the TikTok viewers would help him pronounce words. And so he told them the title of this book, and someone told him, well, that book would be on a 6th grade reading list. So he felt like he could not decode many of those words, let alone comprehend it. So he felt like he was reading at a 4th grade level. And so, I was just thinking about that, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this just speaks to the statistics that we were talking about. And so I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts about, what we just shared?
Well, first of all, my question is, how do you get out of school? Not,
Mm-hmm.
and I know that happens time and time again. And then, if we think about how many students are entering the university system, like we've graduated, made it into college, and now our Black and brown students are taking introductory, or we wouldn't call it pre-primer, but classes in order to get ready for university writing and mathematics. I mean, it's daunting. For him, as you were telling the story, though, the first thing I thought about was just the importance of literature, books in the home when a child is growing up, books on books on books, and the importance of communication and the written word. What is it, 0 to 5, those important years, right? Where children, just absorb it all. And so as you're speaking on this, it's not shocking because we do hear about it. It's disappointing. And I mean, the fact that he's now 35 and has taught himself to read is phenomenal, because we all know how hard that is. But I just think back, it's a hard, as a parent and both a teacher, it's hard to, with parents working and such, to have a classroom environment, at home. But I mean, just a book, reading every night, like just those things. When my children were young, their entire room was filled with words. This is the window. This is the door. And I would put a sentence underneath the word door. We opened the door. We closed the door. There were labels everywhere. My husband was like, what in the world? But we're teaching children words, right? That sight sound connection is important. Singing the ABCs, saying the ABCs, numbers here and there, counting things when we're driving in the car. Just a world of just of knowledge, right? Just teaching those foundational skills. But I do know that parents many times don't know how to teach those beginning skills. But just a book and a trip to the library, is a starting point.
And that is such a good segue into what we were going to really, one of the things we thought we would want to hear from you today is about how to best support parents. As we know that our parents are our children's first teachers. There's so much that happens, as you mentioned, between 0 to 5, 0 to 2, 0, that earliest time. And so we know that many of our listeners are parents as well. What would you say? I would think, of course, that early childhood, 0 to 5, and then also the early years in elementary school.
Oh, absolutely.
What would you say to parents about helping to think about students in terms of literacy, being literate in reading, in math? We know that the definition that we find for literacy is the ability to understand evaluate, use, and engage with written text to participate in society,
Yes.
to achieve one's goals, and to develop one's knowledge and potential.
Yes.
So what would you offer for our parents? There's so much, but some things that you'd love for them to know right away.
Yes. Well, I have to tell a quick story. I started at, like, as I said, at the Westland School, and it's a very progressive school. I was a after-school director there when I was at UCLA. And then I went on to become a co-teacher there. There were 2 teachers in every classroom. And it was very interesting. It wasn't that diverse, a very affluent population of students. And basically you can open up cupboards and cabinets, and anything a teacher wanted was at their fingertips, just floor to ceiling, clay, markers, paper, whatever you needed, just we didn't want for anything. And so what I noticed, though, was that reading, they weren't teaching a formal, like, phonics and grammar classes. Children just kind of learned through experience. And so they weren't worried if kids weren't reading by the time they were 3 years old. And I'm like, how is this possible? But what I observed while I was there were the trips that these children were taking and the routines that they were in at home. There were no TVs for many of them. It was books and it was communication. Language is so important. When I first got to school, and the students called us by our first names, so it was, hello, Dawna, and just would go on and on. This summer I was in the Alps, and did you know, in Switzerland, and just, they had so much stored in their little heads because of what they experienced and what they saw. And I just kept note of that. Every time I saw something, I put it in my file cabinet. If I were invited to homes, I'm like, oh my gosh, look at all these books, and look what they're doing when they're on vacations. And that the first thing I started doing working at that school before I had children was building a library for the event that I would have kids one day. And then I really thought about, after, looking and observing and seeing what these children were experiencing, I thought about what were they doing on their weekends and their free times. So I had my children enrolled in art classes. We looked in the Sunday Times for children's theater, where they're hearing songs and hearing words, hearing stories, or seeing stories come alive. We went to, every museum has a free family day on Sundays. I would go into the LA Times, find out what dates those were. There was UCLA has a museum, the LA County, the History Museum, the Black History Museum, and we would go on those family Sundays. Why? Because they would have art projects. Kids, kids, kids. That's all you'd see. We were at the library every Friday. I kept their library books, and this is a good little tip for parents. I kept the library books in a separate basket in their room that we brought home so they wouldn't get intermingled with all of their other books. And then we loaded those up in the car on Friday before we go to school. They had a little library book bag. We'd go in, return those, and we were getting the next set of books for the weeks. And I think those were some of the most important trips, because you want kids reading, but you also want them reading things that they're interested in. And even if they're not reading, just looking through books, learning how to hold a book. When you're reading with them, just tracking, left to right, how we read the written word. But that, for my kids, they looked forward to going to the library. They filled those little bags up. They explored those books all week. And even with their home library, let's talk about that. I had a variety of books. And, back 30 years ago when we were having children, there wasn't a lot of diversity in books. I think I had to go to Esalen, was one of the places that I went to regularly in Inglewood to buy books that had children in them that looked like my kids. So I made sure I had every book that had a child of color, black, brown, whatever it was, and diverse in terms of genre. Are we reading books that are based on science fiction or how-to books, animals, numbers, whatever it might be, a vast genre. And then my holiday books, I always put away and brought them down for each holiday. So we were always rotating books out. So for parents, the first thing I would say is, from the time you are in womb, the child is in womb, start building that library. And I mean, this might sound crazy, but my husband and I read to our kids in the womb. He would read a book with his head right next to my belly. Sounds crazy, but that's what we did. And along with that, lots of music, lots of learning through music, lots of songs that teach skills like pottying and brushing your teeth. So the first thing I would do, and the most important thing, is talk to your babies. And number 2, fill their world with lots of books, words, literature, for sure.
Thank you for that. And then I want to add one more piece. So when I think about those kiddos, and I was an upper grade teacher, and so some of my students came and they hadn't received that that great first start.
Yes.
What do we offer our parents whose children may be struggling a little bit? They're in fifth grade. They know they're going to middle school. It's going to, or in middle school, right?
Yeah.
And also in high school, we find kids there too who are struggling because they missed some of those things that you mentioned. Well, how might we help those parents to support their children in the areas of literacy as well?
Well, first of all, I want to speak to the parents that have kids that are in K through 6. There's never, it's never wrong to sit with your parents and monitor homework being done, monitor syllabuses, monitor the parent weekly letter, knowing what your child is going to study for the week, knowing what's going to happen over the course of the year, so that you can begin taking your own kids out to museums that might have exhibits on those certain subjects. So kind of front loading, but from a parent standpoint. Now, for my students that would come into the class that maybe you had some reading challenges or several grade levels behind, there was a lot that went on there with just chunking. I would many times just break down the curriculum for them, sometimes looking at a book in 5th and 6th grade, knowing you have to read a huge novel or a chapter in a social studies can be overwhelming. So I would make copies of just pages for my students, so that they can take that home and just read small portions of it in chunks. I would suggest to parents, when these types of things are coming home, read with your kids. I used to read chapters of social studies, or even in high school, I'd read out loud books that my kids had to have for like honors English and such. I would read that either along with them so that I can ask them comprehension type questions, or read it to them while they're laying in bed. That is such a great thing. They're laying down, you're sitting there with them and just going over it, and maybe stopping after every few sentences or so, just to kind of go over what is being said and what is and what is the most important or the big idea from those passages. I also say it's never, there are tutoring services in various communities that many times you don't have to pay for. You can even start with asking the classroom teacher, are there any resources? Are there any after-school programs that can help? I would definitely take advantage of any and all of those types of services. Visiting your local library, getting more books on the subject matter that are maybe written at a lower grade level. There are many times in 6th grade where I would start a unit with a book that was maybe a picture book, or a book that was at a much lower grade level, so that we could just get vocabulary words and such and get the big idea. And then we would jump into our regular text. But I'm hoping that some of those ideas help. Maybe
Yeah.
Go on and on. Y'all have to just stop me.
But I would also say too, oftentimes many of our parents are, busy with just life.
Absolutely.
Trying to put food on the table, making sure that there's a roof over their over, the family's head or whatever.
Yes.
And so I would also suggest that if you're not able, as a working parent, if you're not able to, make sure your child is getting their homework done or find out what's going on, is there someone who can, can grandma help out?
Yes.
And
Karen, I always had students that would come back and work in my classroom just year after year. Ms. Countryman, we're going to help you set up. Those students turn into high school students, turn into college students, right? I hired college students on those days that I had to stay in my classroom for meetings and such. They would bring my kids home, do their homework with them, take them to practices and such. So there are so many young people out there looking to make a little extra money. I know I had many mentors growing up that worked at UCLA that helped me with my financial aid application, and I can go on in high school that maybe in a parent or in a family's small circle or community that they can reach out to and ask. I know students are always willing to do a little bit for a little money. And I know for my kids, having someone in high school sit down with them to help with homework was much more exciting than having me sit down, because you know how our patients get.
Yes.
I've worked all day. I know you know the answer to this problem, but it was just magical. So, and then, I am going to say there were times where I did have to pay for tutoring as well. I'm sorry, but physics for me, I wasn't going to remember back 30 years to when I took a physics class. So for me, we did have to pay for tutors at some time, but there are resources out there within communities. And I know there are lots of students that would be willing to help. Start with just junior college job boards.
Okay.
That's
a good idea.
Junior college job boards.
Yeah.
Lots of kids need a part-time, and I know lots of students who tutor.
Well, definitely nowadays, for many, that's their job. It's or like you say, like their side hustle to, just to make some extra money. So we know that literacy encompasses, reading and writing, and so
listening and speaking.
And listening and speaking. Absolutely. So we have our graduating high schoolers who are often asked to write essays for their college entrance application. And so we want to make sure that our students are strong in this area. What are your thoughts about writing and how reading connects with a student's ability to write?
Well, first and foremost, if you're an avid reader, you will master writing probably a little easier, because when you're reading, you're tracking, you're looking at word meanings. What is it? The semantics and such. You know how words, the syntax, how the words are structured, how sentences are put together. That translates right away into writing. I encourage parents to have your kids writing at the earliest age possible, whether it's just a nightly journal, just journaling, how was your day? And I know it's a lot to put that extra burden on parents, but I just did college applications with my niece, who is now a freshman at USC. I always say we made it into film school. We applied to well over a dozen schools. And the process was daunting. It really was. She's a great writer. So that wasn't the hard part. The hard part was just getting what story out you're going to tell. So we started with a lot of brainstorming. But for a student that's challenged with writing, it is very, very difficult. And one thing that I was adamant about was, especially in the proofreading process, when my sister would come in and we need to fix this. It's like, no, her voice needs to be consistent throughout this entire document. And, when parents come in and teachers come in and start changing things, the voice changes. So with high school students, right now, just getting the story out and then working with someone like a retired teacher who can help with the structure and the grammar and help proofread it and look at the flow and the consistency. And are you telling a story? And is that what the question is answering? In terms of working on skills, those skills really, really have to be mastered when we're in elementary and middle school, right? And that's only through writing. The challenging part about that, though, is if you ask a teacher if they love teaching writing, for many students, they're receiving short answer type writing experiences throughout the day. And short answer writing experiences are important when you need a quick answer to a question that's pretty much lower level, right? In terms of Bloom's taxonomy. But students need to reflect and they need to know how to write multi-paragraph essays, compositions. Problem with that requires correcting. And I think where where we missed the ball on that is that, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of paperwork. As the ELA teacher, I had 135 papers to look over. But teaching peer-to-peer editing, and I'm talking to teachers right now, teaching students how to peer edit with each other takes a lot of that off. And we can do this. Students can do this. Students love to look for the rules being broken. We teach them the proper grammar, and we teach them, if we're writing a persuasive essay, we teach them the elements of that. Then as they go through that process with lots of scaffolding, that's lots of support, lots of graphic organizers to begin and to structure the paragraphs. But with practice, we can teach students how to edit with each other, listen, read documents, and help revise. And then teachers, with their eyes on it throughout the process, but not taking home a draft of a document every single day for however many students. I mean, that's a lot, and it's overwhelming. But students need to write. They need to write in school, and they need to write multi-paragraph essays as soon as second, third grade. They need to have that happening, because if you're in high school and you can't write, it's a challenge to get through these essays. And to compete with parents and families who are paying thousands of dollars to have people help them with these essays.
Right.
That's it. There's so much inequity there. But we have to get our kids writing a lot more. There are summer programs just focused on writing. We used to have them here at COC at our junior college. Lots of programs. Some may even be free that we can involve our kids and enroll our kids in, so that they're getting those writing experiences.
Right. And I think a lot of it also has to do with building stamina.
Yeah.
Just if you're talking about writing a multi-paragraph essay, that takes a long time. And, we are living in the age of microwave kids.
Absolutely.
They don't have time to sit and write. Four paragraphs,
Right. And I know graphic organizers were essential for me, because you tell a kid to write a multi-paragraph essay. If that's what your first message is to kids, they're just going to look at you and say, really? Like, what are we doing right now? And I know so many of my students would get caught up on the first sentence. Like, I don't know how to start. It's like, I know it's really difficult. So that's where the brainstorming and the pre-writing activities, come in, whether you're sketching or just jotting down ideas, doing those spider organizers and such, what are the thinking maps that teachers used to use in school, right? But then from there, just getting the words out. I always tell my students, we're not going to worry about the first sentence in the paragraph. Like, let's just get it all out. And then we'll come back and we'll revise it, and we'll keep looking over it and making it better. But I think kids get stuck in those moments, and we have to help push them along and encourage them, especially in those rough drafts. Like, we got to just get it out, because there are going to be times in college where you don't get to go through the writing process. Right. You walk in with your computer. It used to be blue books, right, when we were in college, but you walk in with your computer and you're drafting an essay right on.
And that's it.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. But I don't believe, what is it, the AI and chat, whatever it is that kids are using now.
Yeah. Look, we'll talk about that in a minute.
Well, that doesn't make us
Yeah. Right. One of the things that I remember doing with my children as a parent was, if it was birthday time, if it was holiday time, and there was something that they desired, then they would have to write a persuasive essay to me to tell me why and how and all of those things, right?
Oh, I'm using that with my son.
Yeah, it's interesting how they can all of a sudden they can think of all of those things.
Yes, they can
think of before, right?
Pages. It'd be more than yes. If you have them write down just what it is that you want, why you want it, how you're going to use this in your life, you'd have a 10-page research.
Yes.
We used to do that too with our kids with discipline. With discipline. So I still have a letter that my child wrote. He might have been 3 or 4, on those mornings when you're trying to get to school, and he's going to love me telling this story, but when he would be that child who had to use the restroom in the morning, and I look up and all clothes are off. Mom, I got to go to the bathroom. All clothes are off. I'm like, we are getting ready to walk out. What are we doing right now? Like, we got to put all this stuff on quickly. And he got a little attitude with me. And so later he wrote this letter: "Dear Mom, I am so sorry. I should have I know we're getting ready for work, but even writing in those experiences, they're writing their feelings. That's important. And another opportunity for our kids, like, dear mom, comma, all I had all that in place. So at a very young age. So, it's important for our kids to have those experiences. So, Cherise, I think it's just beautiful that ideas like, what do you want for your birthday? What do you want for Christmas? What should we get from the grocery store?
Right.
What should our dinner menu look like?
Yes. Lots of opportunities in our everyday lives, right?
So many.
And
But I am going to say, we have to take away, just for a little bit, those tablets, just for a moment, just remove them out of the little hands of our babies. Just give them the time for that, maybe a structured time, because when they're in front of those devices, there's no eye contact being made with a human. There are no words being spoken with another human. Those devices can teach learning games and such, very valuable. Oh my gosh. And I love reading books on my device because I can make the words bigger, these old eyes. But those devices can't have a conversation. And many of our students are lacking in just the gift of just gab and learning how to have good morning. How are you? How was your weekend? Those important conversations. So that's my little commercial on
devices.
Just a little
bit. Not just tablets, the phones too.
All of them, so that we're able to have conversation. We used to have our kids park it in the device parking lot because we're going to have face-to-face time. And I mean, my kids, we worked hard, and I know they would probably say it was challenging and mama didn't play. They would say mama didn't play because I was the one who, did homework and all of that with them. But my son graduated from Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania and my daughter from University of Michigan. We didn't play, and we had them on that road, to be college ready. But it took a lot of time. It took a lot of time. And I know there are lots of parents that don't have that time, but hopefully there's someone in their tribe or a community member, a girlfriend, a boyfriend, a man friend, whatever it might be, that has children the same age, and create little pods of learning. I had students who did Chinese school on Saturdays, a whole group of them, always learning, always together. They had a writing teacher on Saturday afternoon. So it was just, in a little pods. So if we can't make it happen ourselves, let's get a village together who maybe parents can take turns. Making that happen, little field trips to the museum. I got the kids this week, or whatever it might be. But I just say, get kids out there to experience the world, to experience the written word, and to communicate with other people.
Yes. So one thing that you just made me think about when you mentioned communication.
Yes.
I often think about that one of the areas that I find that needs a lot of support, both in the classroom and outside of the classroom, which is comprehension. And I believe that a lot of it happens through conversations, and other ways beyond just like devices, so to speak.
Yes.
So can you share, maybe from the teacher perspective or for the teacher, what they might do to help build comprehension?
Okay, you got me.
I know that I would talk to parents often at parent, teacher conference night, and I talk about some things that they could do. Like, just for instance, if you were watching a movie, let's say, that you would ask, stop in the middle, stop, ask how the movie might end if you were going to do it differently, just different things like that. But if you could share what your thoughts are around comprehension.
So comprehension is so important. And it's interesting because I remember when, standardized testing were out, my daughter would always score so much lower, in comprehension. And we were like, straight A student, what is it? What is it? And I'm telling you, I had all the tools coming out of the toolbox. And, and it was just on these little standardized tests. I'm like, because Kayla, she understood, she knew. So let's rewind back. As young children, when we're reading to our kids, just stopping and asking questions. Do you see the blue bird? Why do you think that blue bird is sitting high up in that tree? What other animal here could maybe be a predator to that blue bird? I mean, you don't want to get vile and with it, but still, but just asking questions. And the most important question, having children predict, what do you think is going to happen next? Before I turn the page, what do you think is going to happen next? So making storytelling a fun activity. When I became an elementary school teacher, and I taught first grade through sixth grade, one of the things that I always did was I taught students to interact with their books. Now, many times you cannot interact with a book that doesn't belong to a library book and such. But if it was your own book, and we're talking novels now at this point, I would have them write. I taught my students how to annotate. Third graders annotating, fourth graders, fifth graders, sixth graders annotating, circling number one words you don't know. So if I'm reading with my child and we don't know the word, I'm going to say what the word means right then and there. So we don't, spend 20 minutes trying to talk about a word because I want the story to flow. We're going to circle that word, highlight that word, and then we're going to come back to that word, look it up together. How else can we use this word? So comprehension can be taught just simply through the reading of a story. Like you're saying, when you're watching a movie, just pausing it. Because we all have that capability now.
Right.
Wonder why this, what's going on with so far in the story or so far in the movie. And I wonder what's going to happen next. Why do you think that character is so angry? Or why is that character showing such emotion? Has anything like this ever happened to you before? Have you been in this situation before? Now, I wouldn't say do it for every book and every movie, because then children aren't going to want to sit down with us, right?
Right.
Like every time they sit down, they can't, because I'd be mad if every time I sat down to watch a movie, my husband came in and paused and started asking me questions about what I'm watching. So just knowing when to have those moments. And then as our children get older, my students, my own kids did a lot of annotating in high school. And that's normally where we see it. So in elementary school, I kind of got in trouble because when I would do a novel with a book, or a novel study, with my students, I would purchase the book, and we had copies there. Many times I would just purchase a class set, but my students would always want to buy their own book because they wanted to be able to annotate. If it wasn't their book, I would say we have to do sticky note annotation. Put a sticky note in. We could still interact, but they didn't want to do that. They wanted to circle and do everything that I was doing. So the district office came in one time in the midst of a novel study. I might have been reading Wrinkle in Time or maybe Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. And they're looking at all the beautiful work that's been displayed, because we would always do chapter challenges. And that's a thing for teachers. Teaching comprehension, a chapter challenge, maybe on character analyzation, a chapter challenge on putting yourself in the story, a chapter challenge on retelling the end of the story, or maybe retelling the chapter. But anyways, they saw this work, but they didn't comment on the work. Their question to me was, where did your kids get these books? And I said, well, they bought them. And they were like, that's a no-no. You can't ask teachers or parents to provide books. And I said, well, I didn't. My students know that we annotate, and they wanted to purchase the book so that they could then write in the book. So I was thinking of all things to have a conversation.
No, right.
My kids are reading and annotating,
me?
and every student is engaged and raising their hands. And, one of those things where we can't wait to turn the next page. And y'all gonna come here and ask me about where they get their books from? And if, and I know teachers, we get worn out with resources, and we spend so much of our money. I always bought books. I always bought class sets because I wanted every baby to have one. Parents were always willing to donate. But going back to those comprehension skills, and I know it's, again, putting that onus on the parent. But again, if anybody in our tribe can help out with any of this, even again, a high school student, a college student, just having them sit with the student and help them to interact. If it's something that brought me great emotion or I was excited about, I'd put 3 sets of exclamation points. If it was something that really resonated with me, and I still do this today when I read just for pleasure, I'm underlining things that are really meaningful. You can do that on your tablets, right? You can highlight. You can look up words on the tablet. You can get that comprehension, and gain the definitions right away. So I would say, all of those things when interacting with books and movies, asking questions constantly, reading them with our children. It's okay to revisit a 5th, 6th grade novel. That's heaven. I know we all don't always have the time.
Right. But every now and then is okay.
As much as we can. I mean, I was in my classroom sometimes till 10 o'clock at night. So there were days where I couldn't, be here when homework was being done, but it was always left out on the table. And we were up bright and early. If anything need to be redone, looked over, added to, a lot of details missing, you're going to add some this morning. So, but
Right.
but it takes a village.
It does. It does.
It really
And
does.
so, with comprehension, a lot of it also, we've been talking about oral language.
Yeah.
And so many people would think, well, what does oral language have to do with literacy? I mean, you're talking. You're talking about talking and and reading, and
Right.
those two don't really go together, but we
Right.
know that they really do.
They do. Children hear the correct pronunciation of words.
Exactly.
Children hear how questions are asked, how statements are made, what emotion is shown through language, right? Children also learn when to talk and when not to, those social cues, right? Someone just asked you a question.
Mm-hmm.
It's time to answer,
Right.
let's not interrupt. How many times do you have to tell our students, don't interrupt, I'm still talking, wait for me to finish. But all of that is learned through communication.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So how does oral language help with writing?
Well, structure, like the structure of words, right? When we're talking, we learn how to put words together. Did you ever notice this in your classrooms, ladies? Some of your most, what do I want to say? Your most excited talkers and speakers in the classroom could write a little bit more too. Now, maybe it wasn't that they were willing to, but once they got started, they could, because they had those verbal skills. And for a lot of our kids, writing challenges come with not being able to get what's in your head on paper, right? So I would encourage my students to have a conversation with your paper. If you have to sit there and talk out loud, we all have now everybody's using computers and there's earphones. If you need to just nobody can hear you. Everybody has their little earphones in while they're doing their work. But back in the day when I first began teaching, we're writing on paper. There was no computers in the classroom. And so have a conversation, just speak it out loud. I would also, if teachers are listening, and I know they are, dictate, oral dictation. If students can just come up, stand beside you and dictate from as early as kindergarten, what sentence is it that you're trying to say? I see that you're right now, there's like a little block in the way. There's an obstacle, something stopping you from being able to write this down. Go ahead and say it to me. As a teacher, as a parent, or an adult helping a child, write it exactly as they say it. Have them read it back to you. Those are the beginning steps of getting that oral communication to link, right, with what's being written, and allow them to understand, oh, if I can say it, I can write this for sure. No problem.
Right. And I think also, for me, and I always tell my son this, after you write something, read it out loud.
Absolutely.
So that you can, make sure you have correct punctuation.
Yes.
Make sure the grammar is correct. And then you're also looking at it for spelling and to see if it sounds okay.
Absolutely. I would, even in the upper grades, when students were revising their own work, I would have them read their composition from the last sentence of the composition to the first. Read it out of order. Because what do children do? What do? We self-correct. Have you ever sent off a document and you go, oh my gosh, I can't believe I didn't see this? Because I self-corrected when I was reading it in order. So I would teach my students, let's start from the last. And they're looking at me, really? Yes. Start at the last sentence. Read that sentence. Now go up to the next one. Read that sentence. Next one. And when you're reading something out of order, it kind of confuses your brain. It's not making a story anymore because it's completely out of order, but you're able to see your grammatical errors or maybe missing words and such a lot easier than just whizzing through something once you've written it and you're done with it. Because you know how our kids are. I'm done. I'm finished. Moving on. No, you're not.
Yes.
Right. There's a whole lot more to do.
Yes.
So you just hit on something else that I often think about. I often think about when I held my principalship, I would work with my teachers around management, that we would look at what are some of the best management strategies that support students in their natural way of learning and doing and being without making them feel as if they're being overlooked. Or you could think about it in terms of maybe your culturally responsive management, tools and strategies, because we know our students come with so many different ways of just doing, right? Doing and being in their own homes and the way that they respond. So what's like maybe your best, or the things that you think would be really something, if you could tell a teacher or even a parent that, that is saying to you, no, I can't get him to sit down, or I can't get him to listen, or I can't get her, to share out. What are those things that we might do to support our students in being their best selves and thriving?
Yeah. So I actually had a nephew that was like a son. I still have him, but who was with us during the elementary days, and he could not sit down, could not. It was a challenge. So the first thing I would say is have your student, your child, participate in what their learning environment is going to look like at home. When you walk into a classroom, there are specific areas for specific things. Nowhere in that room is there a desk in front of a TV or in front of a refrigerator or a pantry, where children are getting up and down, right? So I always say homework and working at home, there has to be a designated space that they feel comfortable in, whatever that space might be. For us, it was always kind of the kitchen table, because I could still get dinner and such done while monitoring, come over, help with spelling words, whatever it might be. But what tools do our students need, right? I would let them go. Well, first of all, looking at the classroom list, but go to the Office Max, whatever it is, online, whatever it might be, let them participate in that, because many times it's like, I got you this, I got you that, I got you, this and that, and you're going to use this for that, you're going to use that for this. And kids like, we don't even use that in the classroom. So allow them to put their work area together with intention. Like, we're going to do this, and this is what this area is for. Every day when you come home from school, put a routine in place. Structure is very important. So if we need to come home and grab a bite to eat, let's do it. Get that out of the way. And then from this time to that time, this is the time that we're going to sit down and do our homework. You have all of the tools you need, and you have an area that's going to work for you. Now, many times the kitchen table won't work for parents because there's a lot of activity going on, right? People coming in and out of the house. So wherever that might be, we have upstairs family room, where if that's a desk area there, wherever it might be. What I recommend when students are older is, of course, that work area being in their room if they have the ability to have a desk and such. But when kids are in those early years, I always felt it was important just to kind of listen in. What are they studying, so that I can support them? And just to monitor, what habits are they displaying right now? Are they able to sit down and complete a task? Or am I noticing kind of this work dance where we kind of getting ready for 30 minutes, but nothing's getting done? And then are they using the tools that are in place? I'm talking to the teacher about how the classroom routine works, how much time an assignment should take is important, knowing though that might not be the time element or limit for your child. Like, it just also, that's very individual. I would have parents say, you said 30 minutes. Well, sweetie, but that means sitting down and actually doing the work, not 30 minutes, but getting up and going here and going there and checking on this and checking on that. So it's very different for each student. But I say, if we get all of the wiggles out of the way by feeding students, making sure that, it's been a long day, maybe running around outside for 20, 30 minutes, and then coming in and sitting down and being focused, but a work area that has all the tools that they need, and a household that is quiet. Like, when one student's working, everybody's quiet in the household. And I know, again, that's hard with multiple kids and such, but I used to tutor in my earlier days of teaching just to make a little extra money, because, we all, it's hard out there for teachers. But I would go into households where parents were adamant about, when the tutor is here, everyone in the household is quiet. And I really appreciated that. And I don't think that that's too much to ask for students who are trying to just complete some work. And for parents who are trying to give students those study habits that are very, very important. But you got to have a quiet place. The other thing is using the library. I have a friend right now, actually it's my trainer, who has two small children. They're 4 years old and a little over a year, maybe almost 2, not a little over a year. But anyways, they go to the library every morning, every day. Monday through Friday, they are in the library at that young age. And she's doing math problems and reading books. So they know that the library is also an area where we come to quietly do work. You see students in Starbucks all the time, right? In study groups. So sitting at a Starbucks and maybe after school, grab a drink and sitting with your student while you get some work done is also maybe, changing the environment. But I think that kids need to learn how to sit and focus on the task at hand when it comes to their schoolwork, because that's going to be necessary as they get into the upper as they continue through the pipeline and go on to university if that's what they choose to do.
Right. Thank you. I love some of those. I never really honestly thought about changing the, like Starbucks.
What?
Right?
I want a coffee too. Let's go. Let's go. They love it. I mean, it's funny because we think about when we were kids, if I would have asked my mother to take me somewhere to get a $5 drink, that it just, no, it's first of all, we'd have to catch the bus because she didn't drive. And no, we don't have that kind of money. But now kids, that's what kids do. And I see so many parents on the way to school stopping at Starbucks. We'll stop there after school and sit down and do a quick little 45-minute study session with a mocha, frappuccino, whatever it is that they're drinking. It helps. I see study groups all the time at our local Starbucks. And many times the study groups, are students of a certain cultural background,
Sure.
and I would love to see all students in those, meaningful moments where they're having study groups and study sessions, encouraging kids to get together and go over what it is that you need to prepare for, this unit or whatever it might be.
Right. I think also, as educators, I think we kind of need to rethink the time we spend in the classroom, because, we know we have students who live in a small house or an apartment that has several people living in it, and they may not have a quiet
You're
space.
right. You're
Or
right.
they may have families who can't afford all of this.
You're
So
right.
I think, there is a shift going on in education. I think part of it should be that we, as educators in the classroom, provide time for students to have a quiet time, to at least start their homework. They may not be able to finish it, but they could at least start it, whether it be during, the class time, maybe before or something like that. I think we need to kind of rethink that.
We actually incorporated study time into the last part of our day as a team. We're thinking, we're departmentalized. We're each, immersed in our subject area, which saves a lot of time prepping, right? I don't have to worry about math and social studies. I am ELA, and I felt like so much more of an expert in that area. But we were able to get kids through, a meaningful lesson in each subject area and core area. And then there were 2 times a week where we had study time where students could get ahead or start on some work or whatever it might be, get some homework done. We also allowed them to know what we were doing over the course of the week. So if they wanted to start something early and get it done beforehand, they could. That was never a problem. I also would come in, and I don't expect teachers to do this. I would do this. So I would come in on Saturdays. There are many schools I'd be sneaking in through the gate in Palmdale School District. My kids, if there was a hole in the gate, we come through in my classroom. I would have all the illegal things we're not supposed to eat, donuts and some milk. And if there was anything that they needed to work on, it was more of like a, kind of a tutoring, some extra support. We did it on Saturdays from 8 to 12. And I know every teacher doesn't have that ability. I brought my kids in with me. This is what we're doing today. From 8 to 12, we're going to be in my classroom. After school, my kids were always, if there weren't meetings, we were inundated with meetings, but recess, always in my class. Before school, we had study hours. My team, we intentionally put from 7:15 to 8 o'clock or 7 to 8. That was office hours. Students could come in and get any work done and have us one-on-one to themselves. I encourage teachers to offer whatever time, even if it's just one day a week, because that makes our job easier.
Yeah.
And I would,
Yeah.
students aren't going to always go home and say, oh, Miss Countryman's having office hours, Mom, it's 7:15.
Right.
Doesn't that sound wonderful? So I made sure I called those parents who would greatly appreciate that extra time so that so that they knew as well. And I'm telling you, students would be coming in and it made such a difference. It made such a difference.
Wow.
Agreed.
Well,
Agreed.
time has gone so fast.
Ooh.
We have come to the, close to the end of our show. Dawna, is there anything else that you would like to share that we may not have asked, or that you are, thinking that before I leave today, I want to make sure that they know this? Just share with us.
I think that, one of the most important things is that, our students are curious. We want to raise children that are curious about their world. We want to raise children that question things. We want to raise children that understand social injustices, children that understand a world that might not be equitable. We want to ensure that the only way that that children become curious is through exposing them to current events. Now, I'm not saying get on that news. News is depressing, but there are, resources like CNN 10 minutes of news for children, for like, I would say 5th grade on up. The most spectacular thing ever, all completely appropriate. You're not going to hear about mass shootings and all of that. It's going to be appropriate things that help, because I would always say, I want my students to be curious so that they can, in any room that they walk into, they can have an academic or an intellectual conversation, ask questions, and, and add something to the conversation that's meaningful because they've explored their world and they're curious and aware. So parents, just keep working on that curiosity factor with your students, not stress, not adding on more stress, but curiosity through great books and good conversations.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. So as we end our show today, I have 3 quotes that I'd like to leave you with. This one for the teachers. If a child can't learn the way we teach, maybe we should teach the way they learn. That was from Ignacio Estrada. For the students, don't try to fit in, and certainly don't try hard to be different. Just try to be you. That is from Zendaya. And then this is to everyone. Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world.
Yes.
That's from
Yes.
Nelson Mandela.
Yes.
Thank you so much for coming to listen with us today. We've had an amazing time. We look forward to hearing and seeing and listening, having you listen with us again with our educational dialogue. And please remember to look for us on YouTube and any of those channels, those stations where you get your podcasts. Intentional Talk Radio Network, ITRN radio.com. We look forward to our next conversation, and thank you so much. Good day and good life.